All right. Think we're on the air. Very good. Welcome to episode 136. Yep, that's a number that is one more than last time.
Congratulations on 136 of the best podcasts on Twitch and YouTube and
Yes.
wherever else you upload your VODs to.
I didn't realize this was the best one, but I'll take it.
Oh, yeah. No, it always has been.
Oh, that's good. Because there's a lot of podcasts out there. Like, one would argue, too many.
Look, if you don't put that energy out there, who's going to? I mean, me, I guess, but
Well.
I'm just encouraging you to keep that going.
Well, it'd be hard to stop now.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense to stop at this point.
No, I wasn't thinking about it.
Good.
Don't worry about that. Well, anyway, how about we have you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. My name is ATEATREE. If you recognize any part of what I've got going on here, it's probably the voice. I host for a wide variety of speedrun marathons. I've hosted for 9 GDQs, hoping to make it 10 in a few weeks here because application process for AGDQ 26 opens up in somewhere between 1 and 3 days. I forget if it's tomorrow or not, but that should be happening really soon. I've also run at 2 GDQs, and up until very recently, I would always tell people during sign-offs for things like, hey, where can people find you? And I would tell them, you should volunteer for speedrun marathons, because that's where you'll find me. I'm behind the scenes doing stuff. But now, 2 times or every other Wednesday, rather, at 7 p.m., I host a show on the Games Done Quick Hotfix called Out of the Box, where the tagline is, if you can watch it, you can run it. It's about games that need no sort of New Game Plus setup, no esoteric keybinds, specific patches, those sorts of things. It is intended, as we'll probably get into, to emulate my own experience where just finding the right game with a low enough barrier to entry can help make a new speedrunner.
All right.
So that's the short version.
Now for the long version.
Okay.
As it always
Where would you
goes.
like to start?
Well, it would only make sense to start from the very beginning, I think.
Yeah, so for me, that starts as a viewer, and it goes on that way for a long time. I've been watching GDQ content since the first one with an actual stream overlay by LLK, which I think was AGDQ 2013. Go back and check those VODs for if you want to double check me on that, but I think that's the case. And so the days of Blue Glass and Monitor Chan and things that not that many people will remember anymore, but it's always a fun kick to share it with new people. Um, and like I said, it carried on that way for a long time. The first time I actually attended an event, and this was just as an attendee, to specifically to see somebody who at the time was a friend that I had gotten into speedrunning, would later become and currently is my partner. So we met in 2014. I got them interested in speedrunning. They got really involved with RPG Limit Break. Some years later, around 2018, we kind of got close again. And so I decided to come out to AGDQ 2019 in the DC area to see them. And then went back again for AGDQ 20. That was the one that was in Florida, which is where I'd lived all my life up to that point. And at that point, they kind of encouraged me, hey, you seem to still have the passion for this sort of thing. You should volunteer to get involved. I did volunteer for host of that event, but I was not selected. It was a different kind of era of hosting coordination, and some of the rules were kind of opaque. So they were like, hey, like you have a great energy. Unfortunately, you didn't follow this entire set of instructions that like wasn't explicitly laid out in the document, so we can't take you this time. But that's how it was at the time, and things have kind of changed. But I started volunteering for GDQs in summer of 2020 as a chat mod, as a host judge, which is actually a really cool way to get involved if being involved with speedrun marathons is something you're interested in. That is, you review some portion of the auditions put in by the host auditioners, which these days is actually recorded via Discord in a pseudo live format where you like the host coordinators and the web team at GDQ have done something really neat where basically they have a part of the GDQ website that streams video content to you through a Discord bot. And then you're in their website, and like each time you finish a section, you click, hey, serve me the next video, and it takes you to a different portion of the video. They have the ability to like um, change it up so they can say like on the website, it's like, oh, this next section, the run isn't ready yet. You have to stall for a couple of minutes. And so it's as close as they can get to emulating a live environment without actually having to have someone sitting in the room proctoring the audition to you, you know?
That's
So,
actually very
uh,
fascinating. I wasn't sure how that
yeah,
worked in the modern
yeah,
era.
yeah. It's really neat. There's a specific Discord server for host auditioning that has the host coordinator sitting in there. Like they do a couple of Q&As to help you understand like here's how you handle this sort of situation, or what kind of energy should I bring to, if I have donations back to back and I realize one of them's a super excited, bright, cheery one, and then I kind of start my way into a more somber, thoughtful donation because that'll happen. Your GDQ, like nowhere else, the volume of donations is just super intense. So you have to be comfortable navigating little details like that. And they do a good job of trying to give you whatever resources they can. It can be a lot all at once. That's just kind of the nature of the thing. But so to an extent, kind of becoming a host auditioner is a little bit something you have to like crash course study for, but that's why they're both there to try to make that process as painless as possible. They have pre-prepared, like there is a sample audition that the bot will have ready for you before the audition process goes live. It's surprisingly complex, but it's well organized to make it as seamless as possible to get into the process.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, I've been involved in every GDQ marathon since in some fashion or another. So, like I said, 9 out of those 10 I have hosted for. One of them was an in person that I just couldn't attend. But I have also had the fortune of running for the event twice, AGDQ 24 and AGDQ 25. Both a couple of up and coming indie games. And that's kind of the story of how I got into speedrunning. Um, the game in question released in June 2022. I started playing it in July shortly afterwards, and on finishing a playthrough of the game, I was like, this felt really good. I bet if I was like a little closer, a little more mechanically sound, I could just do this whole game faster. That game was .mu and Tribute Games Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. And within, I think, about 6 weeks, I had a couple of world records. So the combination of like the game being quick to get into, it was newly released, so the world records were there for the taking, and having a dedicated community of speedrunners. Like, there's a Ninja Turtles Discord because it's a series of games. So there were people who were there ready to play co-op, ready to lab with. Just the confluence of all those factors. It's like, okay, I never thought this was going to be me. I'm not the kind of person to like spend hundreds of hours on a single game. I mentioned as we were getting started that my Steam library has somewhere closing in on 4,000 games in it. I usually just like, I'm grazing. I'm playing a game for a few hours here and there, but this one hooked me. The stars all aligned, and I kind of haven't let up since.
So it took almost a decade of watching to finally try it out.
A decade of watching and multiple years of being involved in volunteering at
Mhm.
events. I kind of slid my way into it through, I walked backwards into it rather than the way most people go.
Yeah, it's definitely unique in that way. I usually don't hear it reversed.
Right. And the other portion of the story is I'm 36. So everything except the watching part happened after the age of 30.
Mm.
Yep. If I can be a story that encourages more people in more different ways to start speedrunning just to see if it's for them, that's something that I am interested in doing. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean it's super easy to get into because
yeah. Yeah, it's
your
easier than
options
you'd
are
think.
limitless.
Right. Right. And so many people say like, "Oh, I'm speedrunning's not right for me. I'm not good enough at a game." Okay, then play a game that not a lot of other people are playing.
No
Take it as
one's
far
good
as you
enough at a
can.
game at the start.
That too. Yeah. One, the more you play it, the more you'll stick with it. And two, like just find the game that you like. Most of the games that I run, you can count the number of runners on one hand, and that's fine. You don't even need to have an SRC board. I have submitted and been accepted to marathons to run games where I don't have a submission on the SRC board. Like I'll go make a submission video and I'll commentate and I'll say what I'm doing and here's the mechanical complexity. And that can be enough to convince a games committee to give it a serious look. It's not just about having the time or, impressing somebody in a specific settings or ratings kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I forget.
Let's see. So I've done. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I forget that some games aren't actually on SRC because I feel like that website has every game at this point.
No, exactly. Exactly. I was just, gosh, what was it? Oh, I was playing a game called Lego Voyagers that just came out very recently with my partner yesterday or the day before. It's a cutesy like puzzle platformer that is co-op mandatory, like a It Takes Two or Split Fiction or one of those. And they were saying, "Oh, I would really love to see this game as a speed run." And I went and said, "Okay, let's see how close we are." This game came out very recently. Doesn't even have an SRC page yet. So it's, there will be one eventually. I have little doubt.
Yeah.
Because if other games like an It Takes Two or a Split Fiction can, draw a dedicated community, I have little doubt this will as well. Even if I don't necessarily see the glitch possibilities, I wouldn't be surprised to know if they're there, even if I couldn't, take a swing at it and find any just yet. But yeah, so in some cases there's that. There are also games like the whole Mega Man X series where the speedruns live over on Mega Man X leaderboards.net, I think, rather than on SRC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Some people just like to do it differently.
Well, it's funny because the Mega Man boards do exist on SRC. They're just not accurate.
Right. Right. They're not maintained. They're not accurate. Yeah. It's
very
like,
weird.
look, if you want to, but that's not quite how we do things around here. I don't think anyone's still posting principally to SDA, but maybe some communities still live there.
No, I've seen more. I'll check there occasionally just out of curiosity, and I'll see like newer submissions sometimes.
Fair. That's cool.
It exists. Why not? But yeah, for new games, I know sometimes there's a little grace period, like maybe a week or something.
Yes. Yeah, you have to like request the board to exist. You have to claim it, and then you make a decision on how long the game should live. Really popular games, the board's going to exist before the game comes out, and they're going to be like, all right, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then you're allowed to submit things. This gives it time to let tech develop, any initial patches that might, patch speed tech, those sorts of things. I think that was a thing with Donkey Kong Bonanza, or maybe it was just that the speed tech that did exist by the time the boards open involved a bunch of really strenuous smashing, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Bonanza. I haven't looked into it.
Nor I just yet, but at this point, I'm entrenched enough in the community that I hear things from people here and there.
I've certainly heard things.
Yeah, it's nice in a sense that like my hotfix show is I lean away from especially new games because, like I said, the idea is if you can watch it, you can run it. And if I'm showcasing a new game, especially from a developer where patches are a regular thing, then maybe you watch the VOD 2 weeks later and the run isn't the same thing anymore. It's been patched, some tech is missing. So I generally don't go for that sort of thing, which makes it easier on me because I don't have to keep up with the patching history of a Pokemon game, Bonanza, something like that. So yeah, the rest of my history over time is around the time I started getting more seriously involved with GDQ. I also met the people over at Fast Paced Events, one of the other GDQ hotfix showrunners, Amber Cyprin, and their team. They accepted me as a staff member for like production broadcast work, doing tech checking and stuff like that for their marathon. And I also just kind of started casually hanging out with them because this was in a period of time where I had just finished moving, not cross country, but all the way up the East Coast from Florida to Massachusetts to be with the person who is now my partner. So I was in between jobs and had a lot of extra time on my hands. So we took up some co-op runs together. I would end up running, we were kind of one of the early teams to be doing Plate Up, which is now a relatively popular marathon submission sort of thing. It's easy to do in co-op and is very chaotic. You're building and serving in a restaurant and trying to optimize to get through the days of serving to customers as quickly as possible. So that one was a lot of fun. I also started picking up what is kind of a through line for me. I don't know how many more I'll get into just yet, but one of my most common marathon submissions is a silly racing game called Buck Up and Drive. The run is anywhere between 7.5 and 10 minutes long, depending on how well it goes. And the pitch is it's Burnout meets Outrun meets Tony Hawk. And yeah, that
Uh,
usually takes people a couple of seconds to digest. But yeah, it's an outrun style game where you can smash into other cars to get them out of your way. That's the burnout part. And then there are also railings at the sides of some portions of the road that you can just grind your car on top of. So there's the Tony Hawk element. It's silly. It's meant as a score attack game, but if you just like, my idea was, hey, how fast can I get through 10 levels of the game? And the levels do get slightly longer. So if you went to even like 15 levels, that could easily be a 20-minute run. So this was just kind of my idea of like, hey, what's a quick silly run that you can get in and out of? It also kind of helped challenge the preconceived notion that I feel like a lot of marathons had at the time, that runs that are too short aren't a good idea because it takes longer to get them set up than it does to actually perform the run. And I definitely had a little bit of pushback on that one time or another. But, you know, you take a certain amount of the work upon it yourself. You show to a tech checker, you show to a restreamer, no, I can get this thing ready and be completely set to go before you even call me to get set up. And we'll get the run out the door in the appropriate amount of time. And it's a lot of fun. I think it's the game I've run the most at marathons because I get to tell a host, all right, what I want you to do is I want you to not know anything about this game before we get going, and then get that raw reaction from them. There's also always an incentive to use a specific vehicle in the game that actually makes the game harder because it's really big and it fills up the entire center of the screen. It is called the Van Diesel. It is a
mm,
giant cargo van that has Vin Diesel's face on the front, and the eyes follow you as the camera moves. Why did they make this? I have no idea, but it's very silly. Um, yeah, beyond that, we get into the era where um, they were probably the first game that I had thought years earlier that I might run, and then decided to go back to once I was actually speedrunning things, a game called 20XX, which is kind of Mega Man or Mega Man X as a roguelite. And then as I was getting into that, its sequel got announced and launched into early access called 30XX, which is Mega Man X and also Mega Man Zero, the kind of successor series, but as a roguelike. And I kind of became the tip of the spear in the speedrun community there, along with a couple of other people. Shout outs to Microwatts, Unregistered Hypercadence, and especially Nunu, a Japanese runner who we basically never met, but who is on kind of an entire other level in terms of, you know, because it's a roguelike, because it was unseeded, there was only so much you could do to optimize any individual run. But I get the sense that Nunu was just spinning through so many different seeds to get some of the RNG that they were in some of their runs. It was really amazing to see. And I submitted 30XX as it was nearing the end of its early access phase for consideration at AGDQ 2024 and was accepted to run. So that was my first opportunity running at a GDQ marathon, which I think was my first in-person marathon at all. So
mm.
kind of like with hosting, I went right to the big time and it just happened to work out.
So, well, no, with like the hosting gigs, obviously you had to do those in person. So this was the first time on the stage, then you mean?
Well, I had already hosted, you know, the first time I hosted was AGDQ 2021, which
Mhm.
was the second
Online.
online
Yeah,
marathon. Yep. So I had 3 or 4 events hosting under my belt, which were all remote
I
before
see.
I went to an in person at all. But I had done at least one in person before. I think was one of the 2022s they were brought back in person, and then they did another online and then another in person that I couldn't attend. That was S23.
Hmm.
And so A24 was the first time doing both of those things in person at the same time.
I see.
But
Okay. The first full experience.
something like that. Yeah, I was doing hosting, I was running, I was doing stage management and camera operations. So stayed a little
Overachieving, are
busy
we?
as as people who know me, I have a bad habit of overfilling my plate, and it's especially in some times where like, okay, we have enough volunteers in this department. I'll be like, all right, I've only got like 2 volunteer shifts right now. I should go fix that. And then things happen the way they do, and suddenly I've got that, and I've got there's a hosting kind of a de facto position for experience host that the coordinators will pick called a first assist, because the mechanics of the host coordination is such that there are 2 of them, and someone's supposed to be on shift at all times. So they don't normally get a whole lot of opportunities to like sleep or relax because their position is a lot more hands-on. Hosts might need some extra assistance in like figuring out how to drive an incentive home or that sort of thing. And so having a host coordinator on duty at all times is important in working with the games committee who sets what incentive should be to really help like, hey, here's how we're going to make the next 4 to 6 hours happen to make that incentive as painless to meet as possible. So eventually they realized, okay, there's only 2 of us. This is not tenable. We're going to bring in some trusted volunteers as first assists to essentially fill in for us so we can actually get a proper night's sleep, go out for meal breaks, spend time with each other, those sorts of things. So I've also done that on a number of occasions.
Got it. So very very busy that first all event, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I treat GDQs as like working vacations.
Hmm.
I don't know that I'd know what to do with myself if I went to one as essentially just an attendee again.
Hmm.
Granted, I mean, lots of time to hang out with people, but I try to find that where I can even now. Yeah, and speaking of hanging out with people, I do have one more co-op run to talk about. This was also with Amber Cypern of Fast Pace Events, a interesting little Atari style puzzle platformer, kind of like if you've ever heard of Bubble Bobble. This is a game called Ricky and Vicky that is not entirely dissimilar. It is a puzzle platformer that does have a single player campaign, but like Bubble Bobble, you can't get the true ending unless you're playing in co-op. So the 2 of us took this up as a speedrunning project because there was exactly one other pair of runners ever at the time we started. I think there still is actually, but runners by the name of Utsu and Tokiji, who had started running it and intended to submit it to GDQs. I don't know if they ever did, but we took it upon ourselves, casual playthrough of the game, trying to learn the mechanics and the puzzles, because puzzle platformer. I think it took us a week, and this is a period where both of us weren't like working full time, so we were able to go at this for hours at a time for multiple days in a row, with some days where we had to take breaks because the puzzles were just getting that kind of frustrating. But at the end of running through it, I think the first time we put up on the board was like 58 minutes, against their record being like a 56. Um, a few weeks later, we would put up our world record. We'd lower it 5 more minutes within a week. And then we kind of put it down until the beginning of 2025, where we realized, hey, we've been wanting to do this as a marathon submission for a long time. Let's take it serious. We submitted it to mainline GDQ. Wasn't selected, but we also submitted it to the speedrun stage at PAX East, where we were accepted to run. And in the process of practicing for that, we took the record down from a 52 to a 47 to a 41. And then we were fortunate enough to get a live world record at PAX East at just under 38 minutes. And it was super cool that the dev of the game, completely unannounced, decided to come up from like Virginia to hang out in Boston and said hi to us after the run and gave us, hold on, I didn't have this prepared. Gave us one of the few remaining physical copies of the game that were pressed as a extremely limited pressing back in I think 2018 or 19 when the game was first created and put onto Steam. So that was super super cool of him.
Yeah,
And
that's at
it
7800.
also
Is that an actual like 7800 game?
correct.
Oh, okay.
Sure is.
So
Yeah,
it's a
it was
homebrew,
pressed onto.
like works on
Yep.
actual hardware.
Yeah. You're essentially running it on the lowest quality settings at that point. But yeah, no, this absolutely is a 7800 cartridge.
Oh my.
Yep. And then when we put the VOD up on YouTube, the composer of the game was like, "Hey, like really solid run, but did you know that this tech is also possible? So we have some work to do. We can go
The
back to it and
composer.
yep, yep. The composer of the soundtrack was like, "Oh yeah, no. When I was playing it, I figured out how to do this. You guys should totally build this into your run."
Hmm.
And so we're like, "Yeah, yeah, we should."
Usually the composer I wouldn't think of as someone finding valuable speed tech, but all right.
No, no. But I mean, when your team is like 2.5 or 3 people, I guess everyone was playing it a lot to, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that an indie composer was playing the game to get a sense of, what kind of music to put into it.
So, what happened to drop the time so drastically?
I mean, it's a co-op run. We studied in a lot of cases we studied Utsu and Tokiji's run to figure out what made bosses more consistent. One boss in particular we've been making really difficult for ourselves before we watched their stuff. So, we shouted them out during the PAX run, full credit to them. And then a lot of the rest of it was just like, all right, this level isn't working the way we're doing it now. What else can we do differently to make it easier and more consistent? There are definitely cases, even in our world record run from PAX, where we're not doing, strictly speaking, the fastest strategies that we can think of. Like there's one boss where um, I, as one of the two characters, as Ricky, manipulates it to come over to my side of the arena on every phase. So Amber basically gets to do nothing for the entirety of that boss fight. And it can be done about 2 in-game seconds faster, but it requires me to make 2 frame perfect jumps in the course of the boss fight. So we're probably not going to do that in any sort of marathon setting ever. But yeah, there's still more we can do, but a lot of it was just getting in the reps to be able to work in that kind of mind meld state with your teammate.
Trying to
I
imagine how a
feel like a lot
7800
of
game. Oh, sorry, my internet's cutting out a little bit. I didn't mean to
no worries.
interrupt, but I'm just trying to picture a 7800 game being co-op and being like a good speed run because
No, for
the
sure.
technology
Like
is so
that's
limited.
right. That's one of the benefits of it. We're playing a Steam release of it, so we have the benefit of being able to play over Parsec or remote play
Hmm.
together. And the Steam version has different performance settings, really more than graphical settings. The 7800 version, I think, is kind of maxed out at a lower speed of play for the game and uses a reduced color palette. So I don't think you're ever going to see somebody seriously. Heck, maybe we will someday. Um, if we
Separate
can figure
category,
out a way
maybe.
to. Right. I think the only piece of retro hardware from that era I have is a ColecoVision that's up in my attic
Ooh.
somewhere. So I don't have an Atari 7800, but it would be kind of fun to put down a run on the actual hardware someday and see if we can make it work.
Hmm.
But yeah, the Steam version of the game runs fundamentally different and a bit more like a modern computer indie game. So
I see. Okay, that makes a lot more sense then.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure
Um,
because like you think of something like Micro Mages. I'm sure you've heard of that.
mhm.
Um, Obviously that runs perfectly on NES hardware, but if you play it on like the computer, I'm pretty sure it's just the same, pretty much the same exact thing.
Yes, yeah. The difference between essentially as Nintendo does with some of their emulation stuff. It's literally just like picking up the ROM that somebody else already dumped and verified and putting it into their emulator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't
But
sure
yeah.
how much different the Steam release was, but uh,
It's actually technically, I think it's all the same files that are on the 7800 cart plus a emulator, like 2 different files. One does input translation from modern controllers, and one is an emulation layer essentially. It
hmm,
just happens to run better because there's more hardware to throw at it, even if the difference is effectively just like main processor clock cycle. The fact that it can run faster with a faster processor is yeah, it makes the game feel noticeably different.
well, very interesting at least.
Yeah, there's definitely still further we can take that, and we've been looking forward to it. But I'm employed full time these days, which is kind of why the pace of games that I added to my repertoire has slowed down over time. But between that and volunteering with stuff, and also now having the Hotfix show on GDQ a couple of times a month, I spend a decent amount of time, putting together, gathering talent and doing that kind of stuff. And while that all does technically take away from the time I have for speedrunning, I have continued to play more games than I probably always will. Well, whether or not it's the games that will catch my eye as speedrunning or just more casual gaming. I'd say I probably still spend more time casually gaming these days, and I think it'll stay that way. But in the last couple of years, I've added a few more games. Double Dragon had that's a series with a long kind of spotty history.
Hmm.
Um, but knowing that I like brawlers, especially ones with fluid controls, and that I like roguelikes with 20XX and 30XX, there was a Double Dragon release again from a very small team called Double Dragon Gaiden: Rise of the Dragons. That is a brawler and also a roguelite. So naturally, I had to get in there. Also a small speedrunning community, but shout outs to the likes of Cyphern and Big B's, two runners who are big in the GDQ and Black and Fast sub community within GDQ, particularly for being other runners of that game. I hold most, if not all, of the single player records for that game at this point. And it's actually like I started running that around the time it came out. It has continued to get DLC content to this day, which is pretty cool, including in the most recent patch, like 2 weeks ago, a new character who just fundamentally made the game a lot faster. So that's been nice to dip in back and forth in. I think brawlers get kind of a bad rap for being mechanically simple. The idea that you can't, you can't talk your way through an entire brawler because you're literally just walking to the right and spamming the punch button repeatedly. But in this game, you have your three specials per character. You have a different move that comes out, whether you're jumping, running, or standing. And then you have your entire like meta progression roguelite layer that makes moves more powerful. It changes fundamental features about like there's one that makes it so that if you have a good combo of enemies defeated recently using special moves specifically, if you have that combo going, the rest of your attacks get powered up. So there's a lot of little mechanical pieces that make it more interesting to follow along with and a lot more interesting to play than your standard beat 'em up. And that's along with feeling fast and fun to play, that's what keeps me drawn into a game. So been doing that for on and off for a couple of years now. I also had a couple of friends, one of the other GDQ hosts, Zenadir, and another longtime runner, marathon organizer, and now coming up this week, also a GDQ hotfix showrunner, Osmorn, said, "Hey, we've got this idea we want to do as a submission for AGDQ 2025, and we need a third person. Do you want in?" And it was the latest game from the Dead Cells team, Motion Twin, that is also kind of a top-down action roguelike, like a Bastion or Transistor or one of those. Like Transistor is the strategy game, but the viewpoint is the same. Bastion, Hades, those sorts of games to give you a point of comparison for what the game is like. And yeah, we were lucky enough. That was the first time I'd ever submitted for the second submission period, specifically for new games to GDQ, and we were accepted to run as a co-op team at AGDQ 2025.
So that was the second
So,
game you ran on stage?
correct. Yep. And yeah, running as part of a team is a fundamentally different experience. I did not feel like I had to be in many cases when I'm in an interview scenario or when I'm running a game for a marathon. I feel like I need to keep my brain and my mouth constantly engaged. There's a certain extent to which it's like, yeah, I want to keep the tempo up and make it more interesting to listen to. But it's also partially because I know if I stop talking, I'm going to have to remember where I left off at some point. And while I'm trying to focus on the speed run, I haven't quite learned the mechanics of doing those things simultaneously. So I end up just kind of motor mouthing, or in some cases, what you'd call going argic mode
Hmm.
to keep things
I
proceeding
understand.
smoothly. Yeah. Yeah. With shout outs to my good friend and fellow host staff at Fast Paced Events, Argic.
He has been on here, so
Nice.
I,
I'd
I
be
I got I
surprised
got
if
the
he
full
hadn't.
experience. Yes.
Very good. Yeah. But yeah, beyond that, a few more games. I did add a second silly racing game to my repertoire. It's called Parking Garage Rally Circuit. Came out in full release earlier this year, I think. Kind of a Sega Saturn or 32X styled game that is, on one hand, it is a kind of like a rally racing game in that you can run it as a serious racing game. And on the other hand, every track is a parking garage.
Hmm.
So yeah, between that and a very overeager physics engine, like if you take a ramp the wrong way, which of course there's lots of ramps going up and down in a parking garage, you can just spill sideways at 110 miles an hour and go flying. So it's a good time to watch. It's surprisingly technical to run. It is probably to date still the most difficult speed run I picked up. Because what can you really do? Like, you can say, oh yeah, you can try this, like take this corner, or if you jump over this in a certain way, you can kind of do the classic Mario Kart skip of, oh, the game didn't realize you had passed this checkpoint and it treats this other checkpoint as also valid. There's like a limited range of cases where you can do that, but how well
You
can you do
go the
that during
ultra
a no
shortcut.
reset?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple of, I wouldn't quite call them ultras in the sense of Mario Kart. They're not as severe as all that, but you also have to be able to lock in and do that in a reset scenario. That game in particular is a lot more of an IL focused game. The game does have in-game leaderboards for each individual course, and is also still in active development. Up until this point, they had, I think, 8 tracks that are called the USA circuit. And I think they are currently in early access or in like a beta branch with a full set of Europe courses as well. So someday I will take to that again, learn all of those courses, and be able to submit it as a 20 or 25-minute run instead of a 12-minute run, which is what it's been till now. Yeah, on some level, I kind of thought one day, and maybe I'll still get to it, to submit an entire docket of runs to an SGDQ that are literally just silly racing games to give the games committee something to chew on. But haven't gotten there just yet. And then the most recent game that I picked up, partially at a friend's insistence, and partially because I just wanted to see what going into an extremely established speedrun game with lots of existing tech, and see if I could kind of actually adapt myself to working with somebody else's process rather than being like, hey, I'm just going to throw another run at it because I'm running a game that nobody else runs, and getting the reps in will naturally make me better at it. So my most recent project for about 3 months here has been the original Mega Man X, and that's been an interesting process. It's definitely been one where I've had to slow down, watch video, talk to other people a lot more than I typically would to get a sense of like, hey, I can see that you're doing this trick at this particular portion of the run. What's the mechanics behind that? How's that work? I watched like 3 videos to figure out how to do this trick, and none of them fully explains what I'm looking for. And people in the Mega Man X speedrunning community have been gracious enough to, like, one of them literally pulled up the map from the level in question. It's like, all right, here, 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 and here are your delineating points. If you cross any of these while your character's too low, the trick's gonna stop working. I'm like, oh, okay, that was easier than I expected it to be. So yeah, I'm still not doing the most difficult portion of that run. Hello, just incredible noted Mega Man X and X2 speedrunner. But yeah, I'm still doing waterless at this point rather than iceless. I am not comfortable doing iceless in a no reset scenario. I can honestly barely do it at all, but it's been a lot of fun so far, and I've gotten down to around the 40-minute mark against a world record that I think is 34:30 thereabouts. So still a long ways to go, and I know I'll have to fundamentally change my routing to get to that point, but it's been an interesting and fun journey up to now.
So that was the first popular game.
Yep. The most recent game at all, and the
Hmm.
the first popular game. Yep.
Got it. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that run. I'm familiar with like the first 2 Mega Mans, but that's like all I've really looked
Sure.
into. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
one of those
and I
where
could
I
see.
know it's like a notable, popular,
Mhm.
cool run, but my knowledge of it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, it's less about zips, and there are definitely several things of unintended movement. Those are the really difficult parts. Like, one of them is based on if you are doing specifically the kind of expert mode version of the run, which changes the order in which you do the Mavericks, the bosses. You get a item early on that lets you retrieve, among other things, it lets you retrieve power-ups from far away. And so you manipulate where you cross boundaries, where certain sprites spawn in, to glitch out the weapon that you fire. And so you, instead of making it retrieve a power-up, you can make it retrieve a platform and then fly that platform across the level, basically entirely skipping that level. You can also at other points manipulate like you basically throw the boomerang cutter. It's the weapon in question. So you throw the cutter out and you cross down into a pit in just such a way that you pick up a power up without it ever appearing on screen, so you don't have to go get it. There's lots of really esoteric looking tricks that are extremely precise to do. So I'm doing a version of it that includes relatively few of those, but they're extremely impressive. And that's kind of where like 5 out of the remaining 6 minutes I have to gain are located in learning how to do those tricks, in a repeatable and in a way that slows down the run as little as possible. That is part of what makes it so legendarily difficult to really compete at the top level. It is optimized within a few inches of its life at this point, I would say. And some of the tricks are so demanding and so gruelingly precise that to do them all in a single run is kind of the stuff of legends.
Are you interested in sticking with that for a top time?
Maybe someday. At some like I definitely want to practice that tech more. The magic carpet, as they call it, iceless, which is a multi-frame perfect trick that is required on that route in an earlier level to collect one of the power-ups without having to go back into that level. You're basically just jumping to an overhang that is like you go directly under the platform, and then without even turning back around, you do a couple of inputs at just the right time that you somehow catch your foot on the edge of the overhanging platform, despite the fact that only the character's head is like level with the platform. So it's extremely precise. I really only manage to do it when I'm like practicing and doing it in slow motion, but I think that'd be the crux of making it work. If I can make that work regularly, then I'd definitely be more motivated to go try the rest of it. So we'll take it one piece at a time and see how it goes.
No rush, right?
Yes, this is correct. This is a Mega Man game that does not have Rush.
All right. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Of course. But yeah, I imagine it's not that different from learning how to optimize, a classic Super Mario game. I know
Yeah.
you've mostly run, especially at GDQs, you've mostly run the original Super Mario Bros. I don't know what other Mario runs, if any, you do. I know you're also part of the Nintendo World Championship trial team with like Sky and Author Blues at one of the most recent events.
Yeah, that was AGDQ this year.
Gotcha.
Actually, I also did Mario 1 at that event too.
Got it. Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Oh
all I
yeah, yeah.
do.
That was the race with Supersonic, right?
Yeah, the one with the technology that combined all our feeds onto the one overlay.
That's very cool.
It
Yeah.
is very cool.
Did you, did you have any hand in that, or?
No, I am very stupid. I could not do that.
I mean, come
I
on.
play I
Aside
push
from
buttons.
tasters, most speedrunners are, aren't they? I feel like that
I
almost
push
goes
the
without saying.
buttons. I don't know any of the technology.
But you push the buttons good and at the right time, and that is a skill in and of itself. Whether you count that as being a stupid proficient or a specific kind of smart, that's up to you, I suppose.
It's a skill I possess, I suppose, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, how long have you been chipping away at SMB1 then?
Almost 8 years
Nice.
as of next month.
Well,
Uh,
happy almost anniversary, I guess.
yeah, that's wild.
And amazing all the same that the run continues to advance. Like, wasn't there a new frame rule just very recently?
There are no frame rules left.
Oh,
The
okay.
last one
But
was achieved. Uh, was it 2 years ago now?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
I
Now
think you're
you'll
right.
just see frames shaved off here and there.
Okay,
Like I think
so individual
early in the
frames.
year we got like another 4, and we just got another 3 by
Okay, that's
someone
what I was
completely
thinking of
new
then.
that's never
Yeah,
held it.
right. That's
Which is
awesome.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Where are we at now? Like 15 frames or something? I'm trying to think. It's not a lot. It's
Right.
not a lot. I think it's about 15. And then you're tied
Yeah.
with Tass.
Yeah, and even in a game that's only a couple of minutes long, so being able to keep locked in for any length of time against the task is almost unthinkably impressive, and yet someone will do it someday.
We'll see. I mean, asking a lot to pull off what you need at the
Sure,
very end, but
sure. There
it
are a
will
few
get
games where the
close. It will get
yeah,
damn close.
there are a few games where the tasks will genuinely never be matched, even in the classic era. Like I think Mike Tyson's Punch Out, the numbers just aren't
Oh
there.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. I mean, you're asking for billions of heat death of universes RNG probably. I don't
exactly,
know.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, the summoning salt video. I think it stops at basically like Bald Bill. The number of different patterns that he has that he can throw at you. You need so many like 1 in 36s in a row that it immediately goes from like a 1 in 300,000 chance to like a 1 in 8 billion.
Something like that. And that's just one fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I want to say MPAT made a video that dove into specifically like the RNG of each fight in an optimal task setting
Okay,
versus
maybe that's what I'm thinking of then. Yeah,
yeah.
Summoning Salt's the first name I thought of because he's
Yeah, he did
one of the
the
very best runners out there.
oh yeah. He obviously MTPO's
Yep.
goat.
Right, right. I love how many people didn't realize that about him until that video came out. It was a
I've
great
been a
reveal.
long
It's like
time watcher of the Twitch streams, I knew.
for sure.
But
Yeah, but a great reveal to be able to say like until another runner came to the stage and brought the game to a whole new level, and that runner's name was me.
Me's a
Oh, to
weird
be able
name.
to tell, yeah, to be able to tell your story that way, to have been doing it for years, and then finally choose to flip over your hidden trap card and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, this story ends up being about me."
Hmm. It took a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Took a while because I know people would always pester him about when's the Punch Out video. Actually about the single segment as it's called, not the because he
Right.
did like blindfolded and all this other Punch Out. It's like
Yeah,
no,
blindfolded ILing. There's
talk
lots of
about
ILs
yourself
and
already, but we got there.
yep. Yeah, and that's just the way runs go sometimes, whether it was because he was still working on it himself or like I said, Super Mario Brothers 1 still has a few more centimeters to go, such as it were, and someone will probably take it the rest of the way eventually. And that's like another thing with really new games. That's kind of the niche that I found for myself in the speedrunning community. I like to get in, I like to help people figure out what works and what doesn't. I take it as far as I can. I'm getting older now. My reflexes are objectively not the best. And then I pass along what I know and the runs that I've recorded to other people and watch them turn it into something else that has been super cool so far, even if it's only happened a couple of times. And there have been people who've had that experience, and Summoning Salt documents all of that sort of thing. So if the run isn't where you were hoping it would be just yet, tune back in like 6 months. Odds are someone will have taken the run further. I think that'll always be the case with, especially with new games. People are super excited to see games that are like a couple of months old show up at a GDQ or on the hotfix or at whatever marathon, and they often get eyes, on the screen and butts in seats. But check back in on that run in a year, 2 years, especially if it's a game that gets a bunch of patches like a Pokemon game or the Switch 2 coming out revolutionized a bunch of Switch 1 game speedruns in various ways, mostly just loading times, but still the idea that like a 3-hour run could come down to a 2 hour and 20-minute run gives you a lot more opportunities to show it off in no reset scenarios. So it's always really cool to watch how runs and runners and communities evolve over time. And I've been very fortunate to be some small part of that over the last few years.
Well, speaking of, we haven't delved into your I don't know what I'm saying, but your show for GDQ.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the show is every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern called Out of the Box. It is a show that wants to show you how accessible speedrunning can be by featuring runs that do not need setup, essentially. That's kind of a nebulous term, but it means everything from new game plus runs to like, hey, you need to load this config file in to change your key mods to, you need to, like Sonic Adventure or SA2, you need to run these mods to basically make the game run properly on a modern PC at all. So
Mm-hmm.
those sorts of things, as much as they can be bedrock for a lot of runs, I don't want to have to explain to somebody, hey, here's how you get this run going. No, I want to show off runs that you can literally just buy on Steam right now or acquire a copy of and start running just the same way as the runner. If you knew the route, you could do the run just the same way as them, because that, with the likes of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, that lowered barrier to entry of being able to pick up a game, use the controller I wanted, and just get right into it was what eventually got me over the hump into speedrunning after, you like you said, 9 years of watching, 2 years of volunteering for it. I was already kind of enmeshed in the community, but being able to actually contribute runs to have a better understanding of how tricks come together, how runs evolved, I think took the quality of what I could contribute to a different level. So that is what the show is about. That's another way that I contribute and give back to the community by, I especially like to feature runners who don't do live performances very often, haven't been part of a Games Done Quick broadcast before. I kind of try to keep my hit rate for that sort of thing around 50%. It's really fun to get that feeling as somebody is actively in it, that like, oh, okay, they were super nervous coming in, but they found their footing. They're more comfortable now. We're literally just going to have a chat like this as they are doing their run. I can pick their brain about why this game, what appealed to you, and kind of pass that energy forward to the audience. And I think it's done pretty well so far. And I'd like to keep doing it for as long as they'll let me.
How many episodes would you say you've done at this point?
The next episode this coming Wednesday will be number 13. So that's every other week, give or take, which means it's been right about 6 months at this point. So not super long, but
Relatively new show,
yes.
minus like the
Yep, there's
onslaught of new ones that are coming up that I've heard.
exactly. There is one wave of shows that is newer, and those are the ones that are debuting literally right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, still kind of the babies of the team, but I came into it with a healthy amount of experience, being being an old head, if not in experience, then in actual age.
Do you have any notable events that have happened on the show?
Let's see. I don't know that I've had any live world records. The very first show I put together was actually two world record holders,
Hmm.
but they were like, for as much as you would expect a world record holder to be like, all right, I do it this way. It is this much harder than every other version of this trick, and it saves 2/3 of a second if you do it all correctly. No, they were super gracious about it. One of them, a Devil May Cry 3 runner, spent a lot of time talking about like, okay, so here's how this works, but you could also do it with a different weapon mode and it would work totally, like, almost as well. It'd be a lot more accessible. I just like doing it this way. It's what I'm comfortable with now, but here's where I started from, and like was telling stories that I think really kind of gave listeners the idea of the connective tissue between starting versions of the run, intermediate versions of the run, and what top level runners do now. He was also at the time running a tournament, an individual level tournament for novice runners to get better at individual portions of the game, which is part of why I wanted to have him on. And then the other run for that show was a Super Mario Sunshine runner who was so gracious as to do a glitch exhibition of his favorite glitches from the run and break them down to show like, hey, here's how this works. Here are like several valid setups. This one is easier than the rest. So if you wanted to get into trying this run, I would recommend starting with this one. Those sorts of things have been really cool. I've also had the opportunity to help show off runners from other marathons. It's like, hey, we're doing Flame Fatales in a few weeks. So here are some runners who are going to be at the event. You can catch this version of their run now. And if it doesn't go super great, then you'll probably watch them do better at the marathon itself. Those sorts of things. Like it's nice to be able to intermingle with communities. It gives me an opportunity to connect with people. It's You'd be surprised how few people have either said I can't or just no for one reason or another. It has happened, but in 13 shows, like, I could still count the number of times it's happened on one hand. The passion of people in the speedrunning community, as you've probably recognized after 130 something of these, that people want to share what they do, how they do it, why they do it with people who listen, and I suppose I'm no exception to that at this point.
So it's not just beat game or whatever category you're doing. It can be like in-depth explanations on how to get started. Because
Yeah,
usually
yeah,
at
we've
GDQ you
definitely
see like complete objective fast, whatever that may
right.
be.
Yeah. Yeah, and in some cases, like in I would say more shows than not, it's just been do the run, and then we will still talk about like, hey, how did you decide to do it this way, or where did this tech come from, and talk about the community, how that makes it happen, what makes the game accessible. Like I featured a Pokemon Heart Gold run that was specifically not glitchless but manipulous, so you didn't have to do the setup of tracking the frame rules at the beginning of the game to get the best RNG possible for your starter and things like that. You didn't have to manipulate something later on to try to catch one specific mon that you want to have for the back half of the run as quickly as possible. You literally, that part of it, you just let it happen. So the run on the whole is going to be slower than a quote unquote any percent run where you can do the glitches, you can do the RNG minute, but it's a run that you can get right into rather than having to do all that setup work.
And I assume they have a separate category for that kind of stuff.
Right,
Usually,
right.
anyway.
Yep. Yeah, and even in cases where they don't, like I've featured some runs that are basically categories that the runner has made themselves, but it fits the boundaries of the show, and it's something that they want to show off. So there we had a Pokemon run on recently where it was play 3 different games until the first time where you can play with a dog. In one case, it was like a story event where you get to pet the dog. In another case, it was returning the dog to its owner. And in the third case, it was literally just, all right, we got into a battle with a with a trainer's Pokemon who is a dog.
Hmm.
And so in that run, like you have a dog Pokemon as well. So your dogs just kind of like sniff at each other and bark for a while. And, in her category, that was a successful clear of that game. So, some of it is really just like the look behind the scenes of like, hey, this all looks a certain way when you're watching content from these community members on this channel. But the secret to speedrunning is you can do whatever you want. It's all valid if you're willing to like work with other people to agree that it's valid.
Yeah. All right. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. You brought up like other events that you've done work for. Maybe go into detail about that because we mainly just talked about
Sure.
GDQ.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and that's kind of the nature of the thing.
Yeah.
The things that people will have seen and heard of,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, small marathons are really amazing for people who want to get the experience. That's where I started out. While I did start hosting as a host volunteer for GDQ before literally anything else, which isn't a route I'd necessarily recommend. Um, for people who want to know what it's about, but that barrier to entry in the same way that running was for me, if you want to figure out how to get over that, volunteering with smaller events is really amazing for that. Um, in my case, it's been everything from fast-paced events where I started with the likes of HUD 601, Amber Cypher, and Argic, and a few other people. Maple Snow Girl, who's getting more and more popular in the speedrunning scene with a lot of great runs under her belt, which has been super exciting to see. And then Preventathon, I saw Selkuth Mind, the event organizer, in the chat a little bit earlier. She's actually the one who turned me on to your call out looking for talent.
Mm,
So shout
of
outs to her
course.
and the Preventathon team. Um, Multithon, a lot of Osmorn, like I said, is a multifaceted event organizer who also sometimes takes a little bit too much work on himself, but he does a lot of mutual aid marathons. These are smaller, more specific purpose-driven events where in a lot of cases they're kind of meant to emulate a GDQ, but just the vibes for things are fundamentally different. You're not in a specific location on a stage in front of 300 people plus broadcasting to 10, 20, 30,000. You are in your house hanging out. Like that's one of the things that I have really found about myself after running on the main stage a couple of times. I like speed running better from right here. I
Hmm.
have the equipment I'm comfortable with. I don't have to worry about any of the particulars. I don't have the big key lights shining in my eyes.
Mhm.
That's actually one of the most distracting parts that I found until I really locked in focus on main stage, trying to figure out because they have those really powerful key lights on both corners of the stage. Figuring out how to block that out took kind of a while. But yeah, there are people who are interested in doing the same kind of host coordination work, the mentorship stuff at all levels of what speedrunners do. So if that the way I described it earlier with host coordinators being there for you during an event, if that helps you feel a little more comfortable getting into those sorts of volunteering roles, I cannot recommend it highly enough. At the time that this comes out, maybe not by the time it's published, but at the current moment, both fast-paced events and Preventathon are still looking for marathon volunteers for a variety of different roles, everything from helping out on social media, making funny meme posts as both to drill up interest for the marathon before it starts and to keep people up to date. Like if they happen to tune into social media, 6 hours into day 2 of the marathon, they'll still know what's coming up. If it's a run they're interested in, they can click over and now they're watching and participating in the marathon. So that's another way you can get involved. There are people who are doing the kind of technical setup to help make sure, okay, your stream feed looks good because, when you're doing an online only marathon, you're working with dozens of different internet setups. And
Mhm.
so to make sure that the runner's computer is set up properly, to make sure their OBS package is configured properly. That is an surprisingly integral part of the process. You really can't do a marathon without having a good core of volunteers working in that way. So if that's something you're interested in, it helps you just kind of like make contact with people. They'll know who you are, you'll know who they are, you have a chance to chat. If that's kind of a way you're interested in getting more involved in the community, potentially meeting people, that's an option too. And then of course there's hosting. It does require a certain attitude, but it's also something that can be cultivated, and doing it in front of a smaller audience where the pressure that you might put on yourself is fundamentally different really helps with that sort of thing. Knowing that you can just hang out, knowing that you can give yourself a break where you don't have to say anything for a little while because that's the nature of the marathon. The expectations of viewers is different, can help a lot in getting started, building that confidence under your feet, being able to navigate your way through the first like 2 to 5 minutes of a hosting shift where the audience hasn't heard from you before, especially if you're like the first person hosting for a day, you're setting the energy for everything that's happening. That can be intimidating. But once you've done it a handful of times, especially with advice from other people, like if you go into one of these marathon friendly communities and ask after, like, hey, I'd like to do this. Does anybody have some tips on how to do this portion of it better? How do I match the energy of a runner? How do I introduce myself at the start or end of a shift? People are going to have advice that has at least worked for them available and ready to share with you. So I cannot recommend strongly enough, like, going on to a Wengus or talking to a friend who does speedrunning events regularly, maybe as a runner, and ask them, hey, where have you run for before? Do you know if any of them are doing events? Or just go to awengus.io and see what's coming up soon and see if they're looking for volunteers, because most of them will state as much on the Owengus submissions page if that's something that they are looking for from outside of the community. And people usually are. There are so many events out there that can only share so many different time slots that sometimes events back into each other, and somebody gets the short straw and needs more help. And so getting new blood in can only help with all of that. So if that is something you're interested in, I strongly recommend it.
Mhm. And would you say like your primary thing that you've done in the scene is hosting?
Yeah, I suppose it still is at this point.
Yeah.
I've been host staff for a couple of marathons. I've been games committee staff for a couple of
Oh,
marathons.
you have
That's
done
actually
games
kind of,
committee. Okay.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm moving into now.
Okay.
Intentionally or otherwise, I have been or am going to be a part of 5 different game committees starting about a month ago and running for the next month or month and a half.
Jeez.
Um, yeah,
That's a
yeah.
lot of work.
The fastest first community reached out and asked me if I wanted to join them, and then I was lucky enough to be brought on as part of the GDQ Games Done Queer Games Committee. I am the committee lead for Preventathon. I'm also the committee lead for the Binary Breakers, a group of speedrunners who identify as outside of or beyond the gender binary. And then I also typically help out with games committee for fast-paced events. So yeah,
Okay.
that's five.
A little busy.
Like like
Okay.
like we mentioned earlier, I keep myself right on the boundary of busy and overcommitted. At
I
least that's
see.
where I like to be. Sometimes I dip a little too far in the other direction, but my partner's very supportive about it. So they've been very gracious in that way, and I appreciate them.
Okay, so you're familiar, very familiar with both hosting and games committee work. Okay. Well,
Yeah, and I still like to run all. I'll usually submit
yeah.
anywhere between 1 and 3 of the runs that I have in my repertoire to any place that like needs more submissions. I don't run actively as much these days, but that maybe that's just a lull because I haven't picked up too many new runs lately, and maybe that'll change.
Mhm. I brought it up because I was going to ask any like specific advice from what you've learned through your experience with, I guess, either hosting or games committee, people that
Sure.
would be interested in that kind of line of work.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, hosting is at least in part about having the right attitude for the work, which is to say, hey, you're going to be expected to keep a certain energy up for an extended length of time. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be the same energy as everybody else, but you are essentially the first point of contact that a viewer has with the marathon, especially when a run isn't active. So finding your way to being engaging to help tell the story of here's where you are in the marathon, here's what's going on, here's what's coming up next. Here are runners, those little crumbs of information that might get somebody interested. Like, oh, hey, I've heard of GTAs before. Is runs coming up next? Awesome. I'm going to stick around. And then you can tell them like, hey, here's what your upcoming incentives are. Here's donations. That's one of the, people like to hear their name and their comment come up as part of the broadcast. That's just part and parcel of the process. So if you can get to it in like a timely enough fashion, you don't have to do it right away, but you want to do it before they tune out from the stream, ideally. That's how you cultivate that, like, oh, they read my donation out, they had fun with it. I'm going to stick around. Maybe I'll donate again to get another chance to have a joke told on air, that sort
Mhm.
of thing. Yeah.
You always got to make the host
Games.
do something embarrassing with your donations. It's very crucial.
Yeah. And that is part of that attitude that I think, you are an entertainer at the end of the day. You can have red lines. I think that's only fair. People are different people and they like different things. But that is one of those more common through lines is that hosts are like, yeah, you donate to charity and I will jump however high you tell me to jump as long as it's not against Twitch terms of service. Yeah, games committee is a bit of a different beast. We're really only seeing, I think, within the last year or two, it evolve beyond a lot of organizations will still treat it as we're going to take people we trust, people who've been part of this community for a long time, people who may already be on staff for an event and bring them in as their games community because they know how to work with them. And there's a certain virtue in that. That's how Games Done Quick does it. They have a staff retinue of games committee members, and so they can continue to refine their processes. And I have to say, it's probably realistically the only way they could get through the volume of submissions that they do by having a regular group who does what they does what they do, who knows how each other works, that sort of thing. But for smaller marathons, there are now marathon groups that will pull in volunteers, like Preventathon did for our most recent event. We took in a total of 12 volunteer games committee members with like different styles. I did a little bit of a review. We had essentially an audition process where we said, "Hey, here's a sample video for you made by one of us. Uh, Give us an honest score. Tell us why you felt it deserved this score. What worked for you, what didn't. How much do you think an audience would enjoy watching this run, regardless of what you personally think of this game, this genre, this runner, etc." So trying to cultivate that attitude in people who are interested in being part of it, but don't necessarily know the nuts and bolts. I think that's where we are at now as a community. It's something we're definitely all still working on. Any volunteer position within a speedrunning organization, people are writing up documentation that becomes part of the marathon's overall documentation repository. And then it's like, hey, we're bringing in volunteers to do donations this event. Not necessarily because we expect to have that volume of donations, but because we want to give people more experience doing it. here is our collective knowledge of how to do donations using our framework in a form that you can now absorb as a volunteer. And so being able to do that for ostensibly over a couple of years for various different marathon teams, you'll get familiarity with how different people do their work. You'll get an idea of what works everywhere, and I think that can prepare you for going to like an in-person event like BSG or UKSG or GDQ. So that's part of why, in like genuinely no matter what position you are interested in as a volunteer, I would recommend getting started with a smaller group, because odds are the people running that smaller group have lots of experience with big places, but they're also familiar enough with the smaller marathon team, scheme, to be able to break it down for you and say like, hey, here's what you need to know right now. If you do it more times and become a veteran at this particular role, odds are you're going to pick up more kind of background knowledge. And there's no better way to learn something than to do it, because something's going to come up that no one accounted for.
That's
You're
never
going to
happened
figure it
before.
out with the yeah, it happens behind the stage all the damn time, not just not just during runs, but you have people there who have your back. And if you are paying attention and being an active participant in the process as a volunteer, you will learn something you didn't know, even with all that documentation, by the time you're done with a marathon. One of the things that I really enjoy doing as host coordinator is getting a sense of doing some surveys, basically to say like, hey, how much have you done this before? How confident are you as a host going into the marathon? And then do the same kind of questions after the marathon. And in most cases, like 70 to 80% of the host volunteers will tell you, or at least in my case, have said, I feel more confident as a host and more capable going forward for other events than I did before we started. And that's super gratifying to see.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had a lot of people that work kind of behind the scenes as well as speedrun on here now, so it's always
Mhm.
interesting to hear everyone's perspective on that, because it, similar like goals, but still all a unique kind of way path into the work, I guess. So,
Yeah, even if you are purely a runner, excuse me, I think you will know by feel an event that runs well versus an event that's still just getting its feet under it as to how to do this stuff, or an event that's lacking in a particular volunteer department. If you've been left waiting to come attend to you while you're like, you got there at the right time that they told you to for setup, and no one was there to meet you, that something wasn't working right here today. And I don't blame any runner who takes that with them as a lesson and like chooses not to submit somewhere again because their marathon experience was fundamentally impacted by like a lack of tech control, issues with the restreaming PC. Most people are very gracious about that sort of thing, but especially if like somebody with your pedigree submitted to an online marathon because of like a friend's recommendation and then just had a bad time. I have honestly had that experience as a host with a relatively large marathon that like somebody recommended, hey, we'd love to have more people for this particular portion of our presentation. And I had to reach out to that friend who was on site at the venue to do the technical setup for me that should have been done by online volunteers. And I don't know if I'll be part of that group again. I wish them all the success in the world, but I had kind of a bad time. And there's so many more groups out there that, you know, I don't think anyone would blame you for being once bitten, twice shy, such as it were.
yeah, I've actually tried my own. Like I did just like a weekend thing, but I was my own
Nice.
games committee, my own host, my own restream.
Okay, talk
Uh,
about being overcommitted. How
yeah.
was that for you?
Um, it was a unique experience. I don't regret it. I probably wouldn't do it again,
Nice.
but just because, yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The amount of lead up time you need to give yourself when you have a fully formed volunteer team is still pretty intense. So
I
I
will
can only
say
imagine trying to
it
do it by yourself.
it worked. I didn't do much like in the terms of hosting. It was more just like
Mhm.
do this run on my stream,
Sure.
go off, but and they'd have like commentators and such, but so I
Yeah.
have kind of an idea, although very baseline. But
Mhm.
Yeah, that was yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and like doing it as an individual runner, like I know the likes of like Supersonic or the Kaizo Coliseum crew, Skybills, Spike Vegeta, a lot of them, they're doing something that is kind of fundamentally different that less involves the charity host position because they are the personalities, they are the
Yeah,
kind of
they're the
front of house,
talent.
and they're the front of house and they're the talent. So like
Mhm.
you can make it work in that way.
Oh yeah.
I have little doubt that somebody like Ludwig with Fast 52, I don't think they have like hosting stuff. I think he might be some of the in between, or maybe the people who are doing the runs are also going to do that.
I'm trying to
I,
remember
I
how they did it because
mhm,
obviously it happened last year. Speaking of which, Fast
right.
52 I think is next weekend, so that's
Yes,
coming
yes.
up. But
Yep.
um,
I know
yeah,
at least one person who is in the event, and they've said like, "Hey, I have answers to these questions, but I still have a couple outstanding." So it'll be interesting to
yeah,
see how that comes together.
yeah. I'm not gonna. I've made the mistake of saying anything negative about that in the past. I'm gonna try to avoid
Fair,
that, but
fair. Yeah,
uh,
no, I mean, look, what they're doing clearly works for them.
oh no, yeah.
Does it chafe with some people? Yeah, and that's just the nature of running an event. You're not
Every
going to
event's
have
gonna
a
get
100%.
criticism. GDQ
Exactly.
gets a
You're
ton
not
of
going to have a hundred
criticism.
percent hit rate making everybody happy.
Yeah,
Correct. All the
it's
time.
impossible. Yeah.
Yep. Some of it valid, some of it less so. And how many people can realistically tell the difference between the two?
Yeah.
The number of people who have enough experience behind the scenes knowing how a GDQ goes together is like, a thimbleful compared to the amount of people who have an opinion about it. But,
Mhm.
that's fine. They can have an opinion. That's totally valid.
Yeah. The important thing is to provide, useful criticism.
Yeah. Yeah. And to try to qualify it with, like, hey, this is my perspective as a
Hmm.
social media volunteer. Here's what didn't work for me as part of that. At that point, you're giving somebody demonstrable feedback that they can work off of for this specific position. So, like, hey,
Hmm.
I didn't like how this part of this event went as a viewer. And that just gives, at that point, you as a marathon organizer can be like, okay, I can think of like three different ways to approach that criticism on the face of it. So
Hmm.
let's try this one and see if it works for the next event.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good balance of like people providing actually constructive and well-meaning criticism, and then the
Yeah.
recipient of it
Yep.
reading it, understanding it, and possibly applying it where beneficial.
Yep. Yeah, I think to be able to be public facing in any way, even these tiny little things, we're a small slice of the world. The
Hmm.
biggest shows in the game get like a 5-digit number of people watching at any given time, maybe broaching over into six. Whereas there are events out there, even on Twitch, that regularly hit 6-digit viewership, maybe even
Hmm.
higher than that. Your Dota internationals, your what is it? There's some like Brazilian sporting event that every time it's been broadcast on Twitch, it has like 2.5 million concurrents. I don't remember what it
Holy,
was.
no, I haven't
Yeah,
heard of
yeah. No,
that. Wow.
yeah.
I think
Here,
the
let me see.
well,
Mhm.
the speed-ons, the French.
Yes, Speedons is enormous.
Yeah, it's I remember because GDQ last event did the whole English restream, and I was involved in a couple of those, and I was looking at the viewer number for the actual, and I was like, holy crap. And then even like the GDQ restream did pretty well too.
Mhm. Here, I found it. La Velada del Año 5, an influencer boxing event
Oh, boxing.
hosted,
Okay.
yep, hosted in Spain, peaked at over 10.8 million concurrent live viewers.
Oh my god. On
Yeah,
Twitch.
wild, right? Yep, on Twitch.
But how many of those are bots? I
Yeah,
don't.
well, who knows? We're still in the midst of trying to figure out why that happened. It sounds like it was something to do with what is it, uBlock or one of
Ah,
those
I see.
blockers. That they basically they made their block lists too strict,
Mm,
and so as far as I understand it, that started blocking some of the trackers that like count how you're viewing. Because if you can't be served ads, they decided that you don't count as a viewer.
yeah,
So when people saw their YouTube and Twitch views drop precipitously, that is the best explanation that anyone has as of yet as to why.
I see.
But more in the way of developing situations. So who really knows? Again, that's one of those things where the number of people with actual experience who can speak to why who aren't under NDA is probably basically zero.
Of
The
course.
people who know are doing what they're told and
Hmm.
can't really explain. So it goes.
Events are hard.
Yep. Events
But
are hard. Being a regular streamer is hard. The
yeah.
number of people I've talked to, I rub elbows and shoulders with a lot of partnered streamers, and just the anxiety that doing that day to day, week to week, year in and year out seems to take on some of them, especially as the rules continue to change. Is
Hmm.
people treat this like it's the probably the most fun job in the world, but you're not just up there playing the games and being the entertainment. You're also your own social media manager. You have to know your numbers and your accountancy. You have to keep up with everything that comes out of publications that work in the industry to be on the cutting edge of how the numbers change and if that's going to impact you. If you're big enough, you probably have a direct contact in the industry at the streaming platform who you have to remember to check in with regularly. It's a lot of stuff that I could wrap my head around it, but would I
Hmm.
want to do it?
No.
No, no way at all.
Yeah. It is really stressful. Just events, yeah, if you're big enough to do it full time. It's not all sunshine and rainbows as people would like to believe, but I mean, at least everyone has the shared common goal of just trying to entertain people. And I think that's what keeps a lot
Granted.
of people going because that's truly what motivates them.
Yeah. Yeah. Doing that, raising money for a good cause, that is ultimately, I think, the way that people continue to cultivate that enthusiasm and share it with people.
That's why GDQ and a bunch of these other smaller events can just keep on going.
Yep. Well, it's 15 years of GDQ now.
Crazy.
Pretty wild.
Yep.
Here's to 10 or 15 more at the very least.
Well, let's hope.
Agreed.
It's the only way I can get out of my basement every once in a while. Other than
No, I
work,
feel yeah.
but you
Yeah,
know,
when
work
I
is work.
started a new job, I had started with just a couple of weeks of time off a year. And it's again, one of those things where it is what it is because
Yeah.
the system that controls that sort of stuff is so far above our heads that what can we
Mm,
really do about it? But I told them when I started, hey, I need at least this much time off a year. These 2 weeks a year are basically non-negotiable. So
mm.
they were willing to work with me on that, and so I can still make it to these, and eventually I'll have enough time off that I can also go see my family and other things.
My strategy is part-time job. Now,
Yeah,
strategy doesn't work for everyone, but
granted. Yeah,
it works for me.
yeah. That's the most you can do.
Yeah.
You can tell other people who ask, "Hey, this is what works for me." If you get something useful from it, that's awesome. Feel free to come back and tell me how it went. If it doesn't work for you, I'm going to tell you up front. It may not work for everyone.
Yeah, of course. But moral to the story, events are cool, but are hard, but are cool. That's really all I'm
The
trying
work
to
is
say.
difficult. The work is difficult. Step into it at your own pace. If you enjoy it, keep with it because you'll only get better at it over time.
Hmm.
True in speedrunning, true in putting on events.
It really is all correlated.
Yeah, in a cosmic sort of way.
Yep. It's just a natural fit, I guess, in that way as well, since it's like a similar like mindset.
Yep.
Yeah.
People talk about
Work
the
ethic.
idea of, oh, if you work a job you love, you'll never actually be working. And
Yeah.
that's, of course, not true. But the process of doing that work, you can kind of set your eyes far enough in the future that you can see how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And that makes that work even just a little bit less stressful, less frustrating. You feel the effort a little bit less. And I think that's realistically what people mean when they say stuff like that,
Hmm.
even if they're being hyperbolic about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm out of specific questions. I've covered all the bases I usually ask.
Right on.
So,
And I've told you, I think, broadly about my history. I mean, I could shout out more people for a while if you want, or I could ask you about you, but it's up to you at this point if you'd like to talk about more stuff. But I think we've, you know, uh, I've been happy to be able to provide both, my relatively brief experience as a speedrunner, but it's also been really cool. I'll say one more thing that I think I touched on briefly earlier, but being involved in so many different speedrunning communities, getting into some of the bigger places where more people are trying to get to has also put me in touch with people who are really just starting out. I had people who I've made friends with who, I'm 36, who were literally half my age when they started doing stuff with marathons, and that's only because they literally couldn't do it when they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also helped keep me in touch with people who are like at different phases in their life. It's kind of helped me reframe some of my thoughts as I get older on like, no, like it literally is about like you make up the rules as you go along in most ways. Like you are only as constrained as you perceive yourself to be outside of the, there are a couple of hard realities of yes, your reaction times are going to slow down. Yes, your joints are going to start hurting. I don't know what to tell you about that. Take good care of yourself if you can. But beyond that, your path through things is your own. Nobody else can tell you how it works. Nobody else can tell you where your limits are. Just give as much effort as you are willing to and kind of gauge how much you get back in return for you personally based on the effort you put in, and take it from there. Take everything one event, one day, one volunteer shift at a time.
Well, can't think of a better way to end that. Good
Can you
closing
tell that
remarks.
in a couple of different ways I talk to people for a living?
I feel like you may have some experience.
Good. I'm glad that comes across.
Yeah.
Feels like I'm probably doing something right then.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like we haven't talked about how you've been doing that for years or anything, but
It helps. It
yeah,
helps.
surely a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess we can kind of call it a day. I guess the last couple things I'll ask is future plans for you in terms of speedrunning or just work or anything involved with the community.
Sure. Yeah, like I mentioned, I'm part of the games committee for an upcoming GDQ event called GD Queer for runners who identify as part of the LGBTQIA spectrum. That'll be coming up the week of Halloween. Um, Lots of other events, Preventathon and Fast Paced for Pride 2025 will also be coming up in the next few weeks. I'm actually running Mega Man X for the first time in a live
Mm.
marathon setting in 2 weeks as part of a mutual aid marathon. Um, I'm hosting for Fastest Furs this next weekend. The through line of I keep myself maybe a little too busy, but if you enjoy the work, the idea of giving up most of your weekends to make it happen is a little less confounding than it might otherwise be.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, a couple of those runs from earlier, 30XX has gotten several major updates since I last played it regularly, including a new character that is a robot cat in a giant mech suit. So I should probably go
Sure.
back and play that character sometime. And like I said, Parking Garage Rally Circuit added literally like 100% more content. So I'm definitely going to go back to that sometime. Ricky and Vicky has that tech that the composer of the game pointed out to us that we need to figure out how to weave in. You put yourself into scenarios and sometimes really cool things will happen. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the experience you get is just like, hey, I enjoyed doing that, but maybe not enough to do it again. And that's a totally valid experience too. But
Either
yeah,
way, it's a learning
um,
experience, and that's
exactly.
important.
Yep. So I'm gonna keep doing more events. Maybe you'll see me at AGDQ 2026. I would say odds are good, but who can tell for sure?
Mm-hmm.
The volunteer submissions haven't opened up yet, so nothing's written in stone.
All right, and then where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah. Yeah. ATEATREE.bsky.social. Don't post there a whole lot. Teatree here on Twitch. Use that even less. But the other, the canards I threw out earlier, volunteer for speedrunning events. You'll probably see me behind the scenes somewhere. And then tune in every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern to twitch.tv/GamesDoneQuick for Out of the Box, featuring speedrunners and runs that can be done just by getting the game and starting it up.
All right, well, I guess that's everything.
Right on. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No, thanks for coming on.
Of course. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, and I guess that's everything. You can tell after so many episodes, I don't know how to start or end these anymore. So
Yep. Well, tune back in for episode 137 before too long.
yeah, next Sunday, actually,
There you go.
believe it or not.
Excellent. Good to keep things on a schedule.
Yeah. I mean, it really helps when you include the day of the week in the name of the podcast. So
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense.
really helps out. But yeah, um, that's all I've got. So we'll end it here. Thanks
Right
for
on.
watching as always. You know where to follow the show, hopefully, at this point. I've only shouted it out 136 times. And yeah, just have a good one. Right, bye now.
Thanks. You too. Bye.